I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everybody? Mike Kadlick and Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another edition of the Patriots Daily Podcast, and the first Patriots Daily Podcast in quite some time without Jerod Mayo as the Patriots head coach. As you all know by now, Robert Kraft released a statement last night following the Patriots win over the Buffalo Bills that they have fired head coach Jerod Mayo after 1-4-13 season. Myself and Taylor Kyles were just down in Foxborough, and Robert Kraft spoke. He spoke with the media. He took full accountability for hiring Jerod Mayo too early. We do have a transcript that I'll pull a couple things from. Basically, myself and Taylor kind of want to break that down here. We'll talk about Kraft, the things he told us this afternoon, the vibe in and around the Patriots locker room. There was one final locker cleanout down at Gillette as well today, so we were there, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to shift focus to the coaching search, because everybody's talking about Mike Vrabel right now and how that is likely the Patriots' sort of North Star. I don't want to use North Star. That was a Jerod Mayo saying. They used the North Star a lot. We'll take that out. But they did also request to interview Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson today, which is the other big news. So we're going to talk about Ben Johnson and his potential fit with the Patriots as well. But first and foremost, Taylor, let's just talk a little bit here about what Robert Kraft had to say. He was very forthcoming, as I mentioned. The big quote right off the bat, at least for me, was basically that he just said, I'm going to be brief and say this. The entire thing is on. Why do we keep moving around?
I don't know. Ahmed, what are you doing?
What's going on? I guess we'll do that. Okay. Robert Kraft said it's on me and that he feels terrible that he put Jerod in that situation. I thought that was noteworthy, the fact that they kind of set the whole thing up and it clearly didn't work out, and he took the blame for it. So your takeaways on the Robert Kraft press conference and where they go from here as far as as far as the head coaching search.
I think it was appropriate for Robert Kraft to take responsibility because the brunt of the blame does fall on him. I think we spent a lot of time talking about Jerod Mayo, where the in-game decision-making was lacking. He made a lot of promises that he didn't and couldn't end up keeping. Obviously, the media mishaps. And then you also have what seemed like a further eroding culture where it didn't seem like people were on the same page. You had the Antonio Gibson, Rondre Stevenson incident where it seemed like the offensive coordinator and the running backs weren't on the same page. Kind of gave a glimpse into maybe some of the dysfunction going on. So we knew about that. But bottom line, Robert Kraft panicked when Jerod Mayo started getting head coaching interviews, admitted that he didn't want to lose Jerod, who he had seen grow up as a player. I knew him since Jerod was a rookie in the NFL. He was a career Patriot, obviously left the nest for a while to pursue media and to pursue business. Then he ends up coming back and obviously rises up the ranks as a defensive coach. And every year that he worked on that defensive staff, they had a good defense. So I get why Kraft did it, but it does seem like a glaring miss in hindsight. And to many people at the time, they were really on top of the fact that a head coaching search was needed. It felt like such a kind of Hollywood story there, like the prodigal son returns and, takes over.
Yeah, I'm going to cut you off. If you haven't read Taylor Kyles' sort of obituary, frankly, on Jerod Mayo's entire season as Patriots head coach, go check it out, because a lot of great creative writing in there. And he mentions the fact that it was a Hollywood story turned into a complete disaster of a horror film. But continue on. Sorry.
Yeah, and that was unfortunate. And a lot of that was because Jerod Mayo didn't have the connections that he needed. He didn't have, I think, the edge that a lot of these young coaches need to justify the fact that they don't have a lot of experience in the role, but they also bring forward-thinking ideas that other people don't have. And I think that's a lot of the Mike Vrabel versus Ben Johnson thing, where do you go with a thing where you know pretty much exactly what you're going to get from a head coaching perspective, even if he's not going to call plays for you and give you necessarily a schematic edge, or do you go with the Ben Johnson where, unlike Mayo, he does give you like the analytics background. He gives you the innovative play calling, play design, and all those things, but you have no idea what he's like as a leader of men. You don't know necessarily, or at least we don't, what his staff's going to look like, all those things. And for Jerod, it looks so bad. And I know at least for us in hindsight, when you look at it and say, he didn't really have anything to hang his hat on. A lot of the staff was filled out by Elliott Wolf and all those things. And again, this all comes back to Robert, because You put Jerod in this position. He probably didn't fully understand what he was getting into, but you, as someone who has been in charge for so long and hired multiple head coaches, should have had a better idea of the fact that Jerod Mayo was not prepared for this job. So it was nice to hear him say that. A little too late, but I do believe that I know nationally, I think this firing has a really weird perception where people think it was a race thing, which I understand. I am also sensitive to the fact that, sometimes in this region, like it's not even like we make it up because we've had people in this chat call him a DEI hire, like those kind of sentiments that are like, yeah, some people kind of just assholes and they are going to make it about race. And they did maybe in some way kind of root for him to fail for their own reasons, but I don't think even we're anywhere near the majority of people. And that's what the perception is. It was either that or that he deserved another year. Like I know Jacina Anderson keeps saying that he deserved to grow, but then the counter is, what was he going to grow into? What did he show you where you hang your hat and say, oh, in a year or two, or 2 or 3 years down the road, Jerod Mayo is going to be really good at.
Right. He'll look like this. Like I'm going back to the North Star. What did you want out of this guy? That's still kind of the TBD that I don't fully understand.
Exactly. So that's kind of the area where it kind of loses me a little bit. But going forward, at least, if they're going to do this head coaching search, kind of just to bring it back around that, because I got a little sidetracked.
It's all good.
I think if you want Vrabel and he's at the top of your list right now, I think that's fine. But I also like the fact that they are bringing in Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's reportedly interested. This is not a sham interview. If you're bringing in Ben Johnson, you're serious. You're not bringing in like Thomas Brown, who just kind of flamed out as the interim with the Bears, and you know that maybe you're going to interview him for like position, but not head coach. Ben Johnson, very different. Now, it is kind of odd the way that they're going about it. Like all the coaching staff, they're still going to be in place until whatever happens with the head coach. Give them a chance. I think that's smart. Because if you can find some way to retain Alex Van Pelt and TC McCartney, I say you do it as long as you don't have other people that you'd rather replace because you trust them more. That's the obvious caveat there. But then the fact that Elliott Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith are going to be in these meetings and be part of the decision when it comes to the head coach, who might not even want to keep them around, because I think the front office and the coaching staff are in similar positions where maybe the front office has a bit more stability because it's so uncommon to just completely clear house after 1 year. But at the same time, like I know Ben Johnson likes Elliott Wolf. That might be a nice match. But if Mike Vrabel doesn't want Elliott Wolf around, but Mike Vrabel has the best plan and the best connections and everything, how does that work exactly? Did the Kraft just say, hey, it's our business. We veto you. I'm sorry. That's just how it goes. It's not fair, but that's just business. And we have to steward our organization in a different direction. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see. But I thought that Robert did handle this press conference pretty well. I wish there were more questions we could have asked. I feel like there was a lot left on the table. But overall, didn't have any big gaffes, which is a nice change of pace for the Patriots.
First time in a long time we've been to the
really bad banner headlines or anything. So we'll have to see how exactly involved Elliott Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith are actually going to be. But going back to the beginning also, I'm just glad the Kraft kind of nipped it in the bud. It was like, this is my fault, because I think he really did want Jerod to succeed. I just think there were way too many factors that got in the way and just made it, like he said, untenable.
And I'm trying not to give him too much credit, because ultimately they did make the decision and it did fail and it was incredibly short-sighted. But in the same breath, we've sat here on this show and continued, and sort of the national perspective on it has been that no, Kraft is going to stick to his guns and prove himself right and let Jerod see this through. And it clearly came to a point, as Kraft mentioned this afternoon, over the last month or so, that, this probably isn't going in the right direction. And I did think, too, that in his statement last night where he mentioned, I was nervous that he was going to get poached by somebody else. So he didn't say it in this as many words, but basically I made a rash decision that I can't let him go elsewhere, so I'm going to keep him here. And he clearly wasn't ready because, again, as we know now, Bill Belichick wasn't on board with teaching him the ways and showing him the ropes. And so that made an awkward division. And then he wasn't able to, fully learn how to be a head coach. He was really only ever a position coach and a leader. And it's so much more than that to coaching football. So again, I don't want to give ownership a ton of credit because, like I said, they made the move, but good on them to not stick to their guns too much here and keep it going forward, just because, while I thought it was going to be like that, I don't want to look bad after one season, because they had always said too, it's going to be a longer term rebuild. I know we're not going to get as many wins this year. It's going to take time, but even if it's going to take time, it's probably going to take more time with the guy they just had, because it was going in such a poor direction.
And Robert Kraft kind of pulled the Mayo where he put his foot in his own mouth, and he set a pretty bad precedent when I was reading, somebody brought up, I forgot about this, where he compared the instinct he followed to hire Mayo to what he used when he married his wives, which is like, there was a lot of things that Kraft said in that introductory press conference for Mayo that really tethered them together and made it seem like Kraft thought he made this great discovery. And we have to give them some credit, because we were back and forth on, are they going to let their egos get in the way? Are they really just not going to bite the bullet and say, hey, we can't be wrong? Because it just started to feel like, well, if you do that, it's very short-sighted, because you are going to be proven wrong eventually, because there's not enough of this to actually be positive about. So,
right.
Yeah, it's man, it's you can tell that it really did emotionally impact Robert. Like, it was not. I know that Jerod said like it was an emotional locker room and everything, and the statement last night sounded like Kraft was, very emotionally invested, and I know he was. So at least now, moving forward.
There is a huge human angle to this that I know people don't look over, but as much as Jerod Mayo is like public enemy number one right now in and around Foxborough and in Patriots Nation, and it's nearly impossible for him to bring it back. And he was on injured reserve, but he was a Super Bowl champion. He was a captain in his second year. He was a fan favorite when he played. And to go from that to where he is now, that's got to be incredibly hard on this guy, for him to have to walk into that office after yesterday's game and for them to fire him. And for him, he's basically, he's looked down on terribly by the Patriots now. And that's a dude who has to go live the rest of his life, who didn't prove enough on the football field as a coach, where what's his next step? No, yeah, he's made a ton of money in his career, and financially he might be fine, but as a human, that really sucks. And same with Robert Kraft, someone who you've been so close with since he was on the team, to have to put all this faith in him. I rewatched last night Jerod's opening press conference, and Kraft was so proud to call him their next head coach. He was naming all of his family, Jerod's kids, his brother and sister, Jerod's
names
wife,
he could pronounce.
his mother. And it was like both sides were so proud that they were able to bring this, and for it to fail so badly on all ends, and for Robert to have that conversation yesterday, it sucks from a human level, but ultimately it was the right move. So, and I think we can all sort of agree on that there. All right, before we get into the Ben Johnson stuff, quickly, last thing on Kraft and where things are at front office wise. He did mention that no front office moves have been made yet. I know you talked about it a little bit, but I want to get to kind of where it feels a little backwards right now and why it's still so much up in the air. The front office is still intact. The rest of the coaching staff, according to Kraft, also still intact. I know last night on our show, if you guys were watching, I did mention a report from the Boston Globe that Van Pelt has been fired. According to other reports, Van Pelt is still under contract as the Patriots OC as of right now. Obviously, fluid. Things will change with that next head coach. But it's interesting, and you sort of mentioned it, but I want to get your take on it again and kind of parse it out a little bit. Kraft was asked about the front office and the coaching search, and that Elliott Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith will be in those interviews, which tells me that they're going to have some say on what we think we should be on the next head coach. But before that, Kraft was asked about the front office and said, basically, we need to find the head coach. They're going to have a heavy hand in the personnel decision-making. And so my take on that, or my kind of thought theory, and we talked about it a little bit this afternoon before, off air, I wonder if this could be a thing where, okay, Vrabel, Ben Johnson, whomever ends up coming in, gives sort of their plan, their game plan on how they want to, what kind of players they want to coach. And then they give that to the personnel department. And then it's the personnel department's job to get those types of players for the head coach. And if it's almost like giving power to the coach, but also, so he's like kind of over the personnel department. It's kind of ass backwards right now. And that's why even what I'm saying is kind of confusing, because then Wolf's involved in that. They hire Vrabel, but what if Vrabel doesn't want to work with Wolf, and then they have to fire Wolf and Highsmith after they just hire? Like, it all feels kind of backwards, and I'm curious where it's actually going to go here over the next couple of days, because there's still so much information that's ultimately going to come in.
And I wonder if there'd be like a transition period at least where, if I really think it's going to come down to Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel. I think that if the Patriots want, I'm guessing, and this is completely speculation, they will either want to go with Vrabel because they know what he is. He brings a familiar type of culture, but also outside experience, and basically sells you the same thing that Mayo was, except he's been qualified. He's been around the league. He has connections, all of those things. And then I think if they don't hire him, I think they would lean towards more of an offensive guru, because if you're not going to get the surefire thing, you probably want the guy who's going to be able to pair really well with Drake May and just completely maximize the offense with, cutting edge play calling and philosophies and things like that. So I think it's going to be between those two guys. I have a feeling that I think both want to be collaborative. Ben Johnson, Albert Breer reported, he has a lot of respect for Elliott Wolf. So there's a chance that even if Elliott doesn't stay in the same role necessarily, maybe if Ben Johnson did want to bring somebody, they could still work together. And I think Vrabel has a similar kind of idea. Maybe it's more of a transition year where you're not just kicking Elliott Wolf to the curb, but you're saying, hey, let's see if these staffs can work together. If they can't, maybe we will go our separate ways. I don't know. It's odd. It feels like they can never have a normal type of search. Obviously, we had the freaking one where Mayo was already locked in and you had no chance of having a real search. And now this year, you already had the GM, but you fired the head coach after a year. So it's a kind of situation where the pseudo general manager hasn't even gotten a chance to really show what he can do in terms of player acquisition because the roster was in such bad shape when he took over. So I don't know. This is new for us. We'll see, and we will learn as it goes, but it's definitely a very interesting, at the very least, situation. And worst, it's just like kind of just funky.
Did you see Belichick's comments about Mayo yet?
His non-comments?
Yeah, basically just saying that
least he said about the team in a long time.
It's Robert, Jonathan, and Robin Glazer that run that team. I thought it was interesting. He name dropped her and then said Mayo was handpicked. And then at the end, he jokes. I thought it was funny the way he laughed. He was like, yeah, they haven't called me about it, so I don't know. He's like, that's not my problem anymore. But interesting stuff from Robert Kraft this afternoon. So that's kind of the piece on that. We're going to get into now the big news of today, or the other big news really, that Ben Johnson has been requested by the Patriots to interview for the job. But before we do that, a quick word from our good friends at Prize Picks and Game Time. We'll start with Prize Picks. First, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, and all you got to do is pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. The playoffs are here, so it's now or never. Do not miss out on these last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, winning up to 1,000 times your cash. They now offer MasterCard alongside Venmo for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. And all you got to do is download the app and use code CLNS for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. I know, Taylor, I hit my Sunday Night Football Prize Picks lineup last night. I had Amon-Ra to have more than 5.5 receptions. And I had Sam Darnold.
That's cake.
And I had Sam Darnold to have less than like 286.5 passing yards, which I know he's been on a tear, but I thought it was going to be a tough game for him. And it was, as the Lions come out victorious and land the number one seed. So that's Prize Picks again. Head over there. Use that code CLNS for $50 instantly when you play $5. We're also powered by Game Time here on the Patriots Daily Podcast. It is the best place to get your tickets. They have the lowest price guaranteed, and it's the playoff time. So unfortunately, you're not going to attend games in Foxborough, but wherever you may be listening, you guys aren't only in New England here. You can head to Bills games. You can head to Chiefs games. You can do whatever. And if you're going to any of those playoff games, make sure you use Game Time to purchase those tickets. They have the Game Time Picks feature that filters out the fluff and only gives you the incredible deals on great seats. There's no other BS around it. You just get to see those awesome tickets. They have seat views. They have super deals. They have on-time ticket delivery. And like I mentioned before, the lowest price guaranteed. And the all-in pricing toggle, that's the one I always use, and that's where I always give you The true lowest price, because toggling that feature on shows the entire total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. They also have their seat views, which is the way to go, because sometimes you go into these other ticketing apps and you don't actually see where your seat's going to be. So you could be behind a pole, you could be behind some other BS, but not with Game Time, because you can see exactly where your seat's going to be. So if you want to head to games this playoff time, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $10 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And even though it's not in the read anymore, Taylor, what time is it?
Game time.
It is game time. And it's also time to talk about not Mike Vrabel, but Ben Johnson. Sorry, it took a little while. I couldn't get the lower third up there, but Ben Johnson, according to multiple reports, Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated, my coworker over at Sports Illustrated, was on the news first and foremost today, and that it's the Patriots requesting Lions OC Ben Johnson. So it's not a short-sighted search. It's not just Mike Vrabel or bust. Obviously, Rooney Rule, external search, all has to be done now that there's no succession plan in place. But I know that the both of us, we talked about it last night on the channel, if you haven't checked it out, where we were in the Patriots, the Gillette Stadium parking lot, talking about how Mike Vrabel should be the answer. But this adds a little wrinkle to it, because it's not like they're doing Vrabel and then the external search sham, right? They're not just bringing in a couple guys and focusing on Vrabel. They're bringing in the top guns. Ben Johnson is him and Vrabel, but this one of the two hottest commodities on the head coaching market, and the Patriots are requesting to interview him. Now, Albert Breer actually did report earlier this season as well that Johnson isn't going to take these head coaching interviews lightly. He's going to only take jobs where he wants to be. And that tells me that the Patriots know that, he might be interested in this job. And it's been reported elsewhere that he is interested and that he's probably going to take the interview. So while it's not official yet, sounds like he will be in the building to make his case. So I know we're on Vrabel, but your thoughts on Ben Johnson? Would it make sense? Could you be convinced into Ben Johnson becoming the next head coach of the New England Patriots?
I want to say one thing. It kind of feels like the football gods have given the Patriots some serious breaks. Like, one, the fact that Mac Jones's last season, they just happened to be so bad, and like Chad Ryland misses just enough kicks that you're in position to get Drake May, who was arguably the best quarterback in the draft. And then the year after, you are not an appealing destination at all. Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson. Obviously, Ben Johnson decided to stay in Detroit. Mike Vrabel didn't get a job. But now you have another chance at two of the best head coaching candidates on the market. I think that's pretty neat. I just hope they don't mess it up. But Ben Johnson, I'm really warming up. I'm doing more research. Obviously, Mike Vrabel, I'm much more familiar with. You had the whole piece on him where it kind of brought everybody up to speed on where he's at right now. I will say I'll just start with Vrabes because I do not want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not doing that anymore. I want to see what these guys can provide. I'm going off the track record that we know of. I will take, the opinions of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry into consideration. Mm-hmm. I hope that he is matured, and I hope that he is more analytically minded. I hope that the things he's learned about player development and things like that from Cleveland have sunk in, and that he wants to be maybe not quite as critical of his players, just improve in those ways. Because with Vrabel, you have that kind of proven commodity. If you know what you're going to get, does he have a good enough staff around him that, you are confident that he can be that CEO type? Now, with Ben Johnson, you're going with the lesser known commodity in terms of being that leader of men, that culture setter, all of those things. Now, there have been reports that Ben Johnson is basically just a less I don't want to say abrasive, but a less, Dan Campbell. Yeah, right. When it comes to the personality and the boisterousness and biting ankles off and all that, he's not going to do that. But when it comes to, his connections with players, relationships, the attention to detail, all that, they are very similar. So maybe he can actually bring that kind of culture. There's also the fact that, one, again, Elliott Wolf and him have a connection. I know that people don't like Elliott Wolf, but I will say it's almost impossible to judge a general manager on the first season because you can't judge a draft in the first season. A draft that, by the way, yes, Polk looks very bad and Baker didn't do much. But if you look at the entirety of the draft, I think they actually got as much as you could have expected from most of their rookies outside of the receivers. Like Layden Robinson finished on a high note. Caden Wallace shouldn't have even played the last two games, or I don't think we could have expected him to. And he was overall pretty solid, just needs to get better against power, but we already knew that. Marcellus Dial was a starter on special teams. Del Pettis was a starter on special teams from day one, and he played a lot of defense, had himself a solid season. Joe Milton boosted his stock in literally one game. And then I'm missing somebody. Jaheim Bell was somebody who was even more involved than players who were taken before him. So, oh my God, I just went on a Nelly Wolf tangent. But you'd at least like to keep that continuity in the front office. See if now that they actually can spend this money for agency, hopefully, see if he actually does make the moves and bring guys in, fill the hole so that the draft can be best player available and you learn from your mistakes. So that's one kind of notch in Ben Johnson's cap that he might be able to keep that going. But then Lou Anarumo worked with Ben Johnson when they were in Miami. Lou Anarumo was fired by the Bengals. And from the people I've spoken to, it's because his system was apparently too complex for a lot of the younger players. That we also know they lost a ton of talent like DJ Reader that first week, especially. You could see how much different that defense looked without one of its top talents. So maybe you bring a really smart coordinator like Lou Anarumo, who the Patriots have a ton of veterans on defense. So I don't really think that part's going to be a big problem. I think your starters can really latch onto that idea and maybe have a more sophisticated defense while your younger guys that you hopefully draft can learn behind the scenes. And then just Ben Johnson, if he is a good personality guy, if people who are close to him think, no, he's going to be able to go and establish a culture. If he has basically a defensive head coach a la an Alex Van Pelt type who can pretty much cover everything on that side of the ball, and the coordinators, the front office, and him are in lockstep with what they want to do, honestly, I'm starting to lean more Ben Johnson just because especially he is also analytically minded. It's just all of the gambles on one side, I feel like you almost get guaranteed on the other. Where with Vrabel, you're hoping he's with the analytics and you're hoping he's good with the personnel, but you don't know for sure that Dan Campbell,
Ben
Johnson is going to be that leader. So I think there's a very fair argument for both sides, but I do feel like the more work I do and the more I dive into Ben Johnson, who admittedly I wasn't super familiar with, I was just worried about a first-year head coach who we aren't really familiar with because he's not in the conference or the division or anything. So it's not like we hear a lot about him, but I'm leaning that way. I'm definitely leaning that way.
I don't hate it. And the only reason that, or I guess the only way I would be 100% comfortable with it would be if we know that he is going to bring in a solid staff of leaders around him and guys who have been in the room before. Now, Lou Anarumo, fired, like you said, in Cincy, they had an awful season defensively. Joe Burrow went, MVP style all season long, but the defense couldn't hold up their end of the bargain. But just a couple years ago, their defense was nasty, Super Bowl, and Lou Anarumo was taking head coaching interviews. So, this is a guy who has been around, and sometimes there is a scapegoat, or sometimes there is a guy who just needs to be fired, as we know. And Anarumo ended up being that guy in Cincy. Now, it's obviously fallen off, and he has to take some blame for that. But if a guy like that can come in, as your defensive coordinator and also somebody who can kind of oversee one side of the football for a guy in Ben Johnson who hasn't done it before, I think that's massive.
Another thing I was thinking about is we've talked about this before, and I didn't want to put too much stock into it because I don't think it's an end-all, be-all. But if you do have your head coach and he is that Shanahan type, that innovative coordinator or what have you, if you have a good defensive coordinator, because there's not a ton of defensive head coaches in the NFL, it's much more likely that you'd be able to keep the top of your staff together and then be able to build underneath them. And if they do leave, have some kind of replacement. And if you did have a Mike Vrabel, because if his offensive defensive coordinators are good, they're going to keep getting poached. And then it puts a lot of pressure on you, making sure you have a system where guys can be guys or gals. We don't know what their staffs look like, where people can be elevated and promoted. And then that's the system you always want, is you want to promote from within. We know the Krafts really value that. So that was another feather in Johnson's cap where, again, I just didn't like the idea of a first-year head coach, and I didn't really know the guy. And I'm sick of falling for this where maybe guys are charismatic, but I do think the edge he brings where you do know at least his offense should be pretty competent as long as he can adapt to personnel. And he's been a tight ends coach, a wide receivers coach. He's worked with quarterbacks. This isn't a dude with a really narrow mindset. He's actually kind of bounced around with different programs and things like that. So it's just, again, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, you know what? It's pretty – I'm starting to see a better case for Johnson if the Krafts, Wolf, and Highsmith are like, oh, no, this dude is poaching some good people. We really like the staff that he's going to surround himself with. This is going to be a strong foundation that if we make the right personnel moves will allow us to be a playoff team next year. Because I think they're far away in terms of like the development and really becoming like a top tier front office. But I think if you get the right players and the coaches are good, like I think that's obviously a pretty big part of it. Maybe not going to get you over the hump, but it'll get you back into being at least a contender for the playoffs.
With Johnson and Vrabel, it's who's going to be around these guys, right? And for Johnson, it's obvious because we just saw what a first-year head coach with no real experience on the staff, what happens, and it's Jerod Mayo's dumpster fire only season as the Patriots head coach. With Vrabel, it's well, he knows how to coach and he knows how to be a leader of men, and he's a defensive guy. And yeah, he did a lot of work with the offense in Cleveland, which I thought was interesting. He played a little tight end in the NFL, if you don't know that already. 12 touchdown catches as a linebacker, but
I didn't know that.
he did work a lot with the tight ends and sort of the offensive side of the ball in Cleveland as a defensive perspective. So he's not, completely oblivious to that side of the ball, but he's not going to be the offensive play caller. You have a quarterback in Drake May who is the franchise, and you need to make sure that no matter what, the offensive side of the ball is taken care of. And I think I have enough trust in Mike Vrabel where he's brought in guys like Matt LaFleur. He's brought in guys like Arthur Smith who know how to be an offensive coordinator. Both of those guys went on to be head coaches at some point. And so whether it's Josh McDaniels, whoever he brings in, if it's Alex Van Pelt again, he's still available and could interview for the job. I trust Vrabel to handle that side of the ball. The only struggle is if you get it wrong, you have to move on to another coordinator. Right. That just really hurts Drake May's development. And so we'll have to see what happens there. I think there's question marks around both, but as far as a first-year head coach in Ben Johnson, if you're going to do that again, I need some assurance that this isn't just going to be a sham coaching staff around him, which is what it kind of felt like this season. So that's kind of where we're at with Ben Johnson. That's where we're at with Robert Kraft. A quick hitter, Patriots Daily today. Any other thoughts, Taylor, before we scoot here? I know we're going to have a couple more pods throughout the week. We'll keep you updated on Twitter and such. We're probably going to do a crossover with Brian and Alex with the Pats beat guys as well at some point. So we're looking at Wednesday, Thursday on that for those curious and want to see the band back together again. But any thoughts here as from what we've learned? And also to keep going on this quick little rant here, anytime there's any sort of breaking news, Patriots updates, head coaching, front office, things of that nature, we're going to be here on Press Pass updating you on it. So make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. But Taylor, before we get out of here, any thoughts on Kraft, Ben Johnson, and where this thing's at now that Jerod Mayo is officially out of Foxborough?
No additional thoughts. We got stand-ups coming, so we'll have other, a little more deeper on some of the things that happened there. One thing I will say, the Patriots signed 7 players to futures contracts. Not crazy news, frankly. A lot of these players, people aren't going to be familiar with, but just for the sake of being thorough, the players are defensive tackle Marcus Harris, cornerback DJ James, wide receiver John Giles, tackle Caleb Jones, who is one of the few practice squad players this year who signed and was never cut. He signed pretty early on, right, and it seems like the coaching staff actually really does like him, so it does make a lot of sense. And then after Caleb Jones, it was linebacker Andrew Parker Jr., safety Mark Perry, that was announced a little bit earlier today, and kicker is it Parker Tony Romo? Am I Parker?
It's John Parker Romo. There's no
John.
Tony.
Oh, John Parker Romo. Yeah, okay, that was it. So those are the guys who signed futures contracts.
Sometimes futures contracts are, it's you have guys. It's frankly oftentimes it's warm bodies for camp, practice squads, etc. Yeah. But Michael Jordan was a futures contract signing last year for the Patriots, and we know how that turned out. That he ended up starting a ton of games here. Obviously left at some point, but. Definitely noteworthy. They bring in the second kicker, couple cornerbacks, wide receiver John Giles. Maybe, who knows, one of them ends up making a couple starts next season.
I liked Mark Perry and DJ James coming out of college, so hopefully they can maybe put on some more weight or something, get in closer to NFL shape, because those are some talented players. I think it was size was the big concern for both of them, so we'll see.
Interesting. All right, we'll see where that goes. Well, we got a super chat that we have to hit before we get out of here. This is from D. D, we appreciate it. Why did Wolf get another chance but Mayo? SMH.
They're evaluated very differently. Yeah, the positions are evaluated very differently because the head coach is the forward-facing representative of the team. So that's why with Jerod, it just got to a point where it's all right, you're hurting the respectability of the team because you're going out here, you're saying things, you're having to backtrack. That was one thing. That was stacked on top of the poor game management at times. the fact that the culture behind the scenes seemed like it was deteriorating. Like the head coach just has his hand in so many other pies, and those pies almost all went rotten when Jerod was here. That's why he got fired after a year, because the only pie he put his hand in that didn't go sour was the one of players buying in, which was admirable, but not nearly enough to run a football team. Now, a general manager is very different. A lot of the times, the things that they do, similar to a head coach, but like the foundation you lay can't really be seen for quite some time. But because there's less room for you to make glaring mistakes, like Jerod Mayo did with in-game, outside of games, and all those different behind the scenes and all that, that's a big part of it as well. And frankly, again, we keep going in circles with this Elliott Wolf thing, but another aspect I think people don't remember is that when you look at the coaching staff, especially on the offense, everything that was positive was Elliott Wolf. He added those people. It was T.C. McCartney. It was Alex Van Pelt. It was Bob Bicknell, who I know people, who's Bob Bicknell, but like Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper both really love that tight end room. So That's not insignificant. Then like Tyler Hughes was a Mayo guy. So again, there would not have been much of anything to be happy about with the Patriots if not for Elliott Wolf. Now, could another GM have done more? Maybe. But there's also GMs that would have done less. And as much as people hate to hear this, Elliott Wolf is a very highly respected executive throughout the league. If Ben Johnson is saying, hey, you got Elliott Wolf, I'm cool with that. I respect the guy. I think he bought a little bit more time. And then
his seat is also still hot as hell right now, Elliott Wolf.
Yeah.
His job is not guaranteed. It still feels like this is sort of we still need a leader in the room right now to kind of figure out, for example, the futures contracts they just signed, or keeping something in the scouting department and continuing to have guys ready for the NFL draft that's coming soon, which having the 4th overall pick is still very important. So like you need something in the room in the interim. And that's kind of what it feels like Elliott Wolf is right now. He is the lead executive type thing until they figure out the coaching staff and the rest of it.
Exactly. So yeah, that's pretty much why. It's just the head coach has so many other boxes they need to check. And when they don't check them, it can just be so much more glaring. Whereas with Elliott Wolf, he definitely had his misfires and places where he maybe could have been more aggressive in pursuing things. But I think it's very disingenuous to pretend like this was not a pretty shallow free agency class, which we said before free agency. This is not revisionist history. We continuously said there's like 4 or 5 players we really liked, and the rest weren't huge difference makers. The draft, they reached. Learn from your mistakes. Don't draft to fill holes. Draft to get the best talent available on your team. And then I think his in-season acquisitions, I don't know how much more you really want from the guy. I know people were mad they didn't sign DJ Humphries, who was literally a backup for Kansas City because he was hurt for most of the season and then got hurt after barely playing for them. So, this is not Madden. Remember, it is not easy to fill a roster because unlike in Madden, free agents can say no because you got a millionaire's tax and you have crappy weather, no beaches. I could go on and on and on. Antonio Gibson himself was like, there's nothing to do here. Like, that's how people think. A lot of these players are from the South. They're not trying to come up to the North where it's cold. They don't know anybody. So, give Elliott Wolf one more offseason. That's like what I said with Jerod Mayo. I gave him till the bye week. That was when I was like, you know what? No improvements. I'm done. If Elliott Wolf comes out of this free agency period, is not competitive, or doesn't sign the guys that he needs to really go into the draft in a good position, then you're going to hear me saying a very different message on this show. Just know that.
Yep, I'm with you. And I think, too, it's worth noting, and we kind of talked about this earlier, but we were kind of on the same path here with Jerod Mayo as ownership, where, we thought we were going to get the benefit of the doubt, and he should have for a little while until this last month happened, which, even Robert Kraft today admitted that over the last month, it kind of felt like this whole thing was rudderless and directionless, and he had to make a move. So at the end of the day, they make it. Now we're on to a different head coach in as many seasons here. 3 head coaches in 3 seasons for the Patriots. They will kick off this search very soon, and we will have you covered every single day throughout it.
I'll have covered a different head coach every year that I've been on the beat. That's insane.
It's Taylor's fault. That's what I come away with this saying. But
Butte.
Yep. Oh, there goes the Keyshawn Butte, and the camera goes. But that's okay. Anyway, that's going to do it here for myself and Taylor Kyles. A quick update on Robert Kraft taking blame for Jerod Mayo's firing and the Patriots requesting to interview Ben Johnson for the open head coaching position. So, as I said before, we'll be back here with updates, with podcasts, all of it. Stand-ups coming from Foxbar earlier today. So make sure you keep it locked in here on Patriots Press Pass. Rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Read all Taylor's written work over at CLNSmedia.com. And stay on the Patriots beat as things continue to happen down in Foxborough. Until next time here on Pat's Daily, he's Taylor Kyles. I'm Mike Kadlick. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we will see you guys next time. Peace out, everyone.